Hi, I'm Sarah. This is Hardcover Hearts, and I'm here with my week of reading wrap-up, where I talk about the books that I read, what I'm currently reading, and potentially could read next week based on my mood. I had a very strange reading week this week. There were two books that I thought for sure I was going to enjoy. I was going, if not love them, I was really, really going to like them. The kind of experimental, recent releases, kind of modern, kind of women writers, so pulling all the elements that I usually really enjoy, and both let me down in very different ways. So I turned to other genres that lifted me up and brought me some joy this week. So let's talk about the strange week that I had. The first book, this is one that I was this close to buying, but I'm trying to hold off and not buy as many books. So I didn't, but I got this from the library. So this is Biography of X by Lacey. And with this one, this is really a case of too much and not enough. This is the story of this widow who is really struggling after the death of her wife. She's struggling to kind of contextualize and understand her wife, who is a very enigmatic character. She was a artist, a writer, a painter, a conceptual artist, and she had a very interesting relationship with her, very challenging relationship with her. And she's trying to put the pieces together, and she's being told not to. She's being told by all of her wife's friends, her wife being X, not to do it, to let her memories be the memories and to not go digging, because X was a very private, guarded person. And we find out as she's kind of going through these memories and trying to specifically understand what was her wife's real name, because she doesn't even know that. She ends up kind of going down this rabbit hole and finding out all sorts of things. Now, okay, so I'll pause there. Now that could be interesting, because what really is at the crux of that part of the book is, in my opinion, in my mind, it's really about boundaries and the rights of the individual versus the rights of the artist. We expect artists to kind of be creative and bold and brash and break rules and be iconoclastic and push boundaries. But for an individual, where does the artist's need supersede the need of the individual? When is that justified? When is it not? And then the vice versa. So for the wife, when is it her right to know and to have an understanding of her wife and her wife's past and all of that? So I found that to be interesting. But then there's a plus. So this plus is what really threw me, because I don't think it was ever resolved, and it only added kind of static and noise to the background of the core conceit and the core situation, in my opinion. Now, but allow me to say, it was a really interesting static. It was I actually found this part more interesting than the other. And that is that this is all set in an alternative United States, where right before World War II, the southern states seceded and there was a war, and they seceded from the United States and became the Southern Territory. And the Southern Territory basically doubled down on racism, on homophobia, on religious zealotry, basically kind of projecting what could happen today and setting it in an earlier time. And there was fun little things where she she would say that Emma Goldman, the famous woman anarchist, became the governor of a state, and then there was backlash against that, even though she modified some of her anarchistic leanings to be in power and be a part of government. Things like that were really fun, that I enjoyed as kind of like little Easter eggs throughout. But the idea was that the reason that X never mentioned where she was from or her name, her true name that she was born with, was because she had escaped. And by escaping from the Southern Territories, to share any of that would endanger people. And that's fair, but the rest of it just kind of spun for me, and I didn't find it connecting. There were too many strings that I wanted to have pulled that were just kind of left dangling, in my opinion. I thought the ending was interesting, but again, I didn't like the characters. I didn't feel for them what I think maybe I was supposed to. So yeah, this was just it just didn't work for me. So yeah, it had all the ingredients there, but together, cumulatively, it didn't hold. It didn't hold for me. So that's a bummer. Next, another one that didn't hold together for me. And I was reading, and number one, this cover is amazing. This is one of my favorite covers of the past few years. This is Checkout 19 by Claire Louise Bennett. Now, Claire Louise Bennett wrote Pond, which was also a book that I struggled with getting into. Once I was there, I really enjoyed it, but she does a stream of consciousness that I just wasn't used to. That was before I'd read any Victoria Woolf, before I read this book, this behemoth, Ducks Newburyport. So I'm going to talk about these two together, but I'm going to put this down because as I remembered from when I held it up for almost a year, this thing is heavy. This is a brick. Okay, so what we have here is the story of a young woman who is a writer. She's very introverted. She's very awkward. Everything we hear is from her internal monologue. And also these interspersings of writings that she does. Some of it was brilliant. So because she's a writer, she also is really steeped in other writers. And so there's just tons of names of authors through here that, I'll be honest, before I started BookTube and before I started really investigating women writers, especially contemporary women writers, I wouldn't have known even maybe a 10th of the names that she mentioned, which, so I was reading this with my In Real Life book club, and that was a little off-putting to, I think, to a couple of the other women that I was reading with, because if you don't know the person, if you don't have the context, it's a language that you can't contribute to. And that was my biggest challenge with this book, is that the type of writing, which is it's blocky. It's very Ducks Newburyport. Here, there's no paragraphs in these random pages that I picked out. And so you're just in their mind. But in Ducks Newburyport, there was a sense of place, of time, and we had a singular character that we were in her mind. But through that process, you were grounded in this Ohio kitchen with this singular woman. But we follow this young woman through a bunch of years as she's kind of growing up. And it's very hard it was hard for me to kind of follow along as to where we are now in her life. Who's she meeting? What is she thinking about them? We're back in the stories she's writing, right? And Ducks Newburyport did have something like that. We have the story of the mountain lions, but that served more as a release valve. And this felt more that it was more integral because it was her writing. So it was another form of her art. I found it really difficult. I found myself scanning and skimming, and I am not a skimmer. I will read every single word when I'm invested. And so for me, one of the first indications that I'm not connecting with the material is if I'm skimming. I would skim, and then there would be a sentence of such outstanding beauty and thoughtfulness and intelligence that I would just kind of stop and be like, oh, okay, that's something right there. But it wasn't enough to hold me through. I get that this is an outsider, and I usually love outsider stories. But I think it was the way the story was told. It kept me at such a distance. I felt that I was being tested as opposed to being invited in. And I don't mind, again, I don't mind hard books. I read Ducks Newburyport. I've read really difficult works. But this felt guarded. It felt like I was being tested. And I don't like that. So this was not successful for me. And although Pond, I did end up enjoying, although I skimmed a bunch of Pond, I'll be honest too, but I think that had a rooting, and we had a sense of place that we lacked here. So I remember thinking that I was expecting this was going to be on the Women's Prize because it was talked about so much and it was raved about so much from critics. But now I think I understand as to why it was not included. So bummer for those two. But let me tell you about the joy of this week. This is also from my library, and I had put a hold on it when it first was released. This is BookTube's own Katie Lumsden. Katie does Books and Things, a wildly successful BookTube channel. She's been doing it for many years, and she is one of the biggest champions, if not creators, and people who keeps Victober going. And you just tell from her channel, just her enthusiasm for that time period. And she brought it all to bear with this book. This is her first book. And I was a little trepidatious, you want people that are in your community to do well. I want them to do well. So I was reading it just with hoping that it would pay off. And wow, I mean, she did it. It's phenomenal. So I'll start with that. This is a fantastic Gothic novel. So we have this really great character, Margaret, and Margaret is a widow. She was married to a pastor who has passed away, and she was denied the money. He changed his will right before he died and gave his mother everything. So she is left, in essence, destitute. She has his watch, and that's it. So she goes to be a governess. She accepts an ad, goes to be a governess at this estate that's really deep into the country, and even has problems getting there because it's isolated, it's off the beaten path, not very well known, and the villagers who kind of live in a nearby but not close village are very wary of this estate. Gothic vibes from the get-go. What I love about it is it has bits of like Rebecca, bits of Jane Eyre, and other types of, some Dickens in there, that it really feels like she's pulling kind of the best elements of the genre and putting them together, but also with a nod to what we understand about life today and how we live today. So there are things that would never have been discussed in Victorian times that are approached and brought to life here, but done without a imposition of modernity onto it, but instead a recognition that these people always existed. People always dealt with these things. They just weren't talked about. And so she weaves it in, and it feels very natural. It feels very normal, and very, very well done. Let me tell you a little bit more about it, because I don't want to just sit here and rave about like how good it is without giving you a little bit more to wet your whistle. So she's brought in to teach Louis, and Louis is an only child, and he's very lonely, but also he's a kid that really loves his mother and doesn't want her to feel bad. And so he tries to mask that, and he tries to deal with just enough. But ultimately he doesn't leave the estate or the grounds, and he's never out of someone's sight. And his mother, Mrs. Eversham, such a Dickens name, right? Mrs. Eversham is very guarded. She's very concerned for the welfare of her child, and it reeks a little bit of paranoia. Is she crazy? Is she claustrophobic? Is she agoraphobic? What's going on? And nobody really knows a lot. There are a few of the staff that have been with her for a while, but there's just not a lot of context and details as to the history. There is one maid who loves to taunt and tease and gossip, and she brings all sorts of scandal to our main character, Margaret. But Margaret doesn't really trust her. And she's also a big fan of talking about how the place is haunted and that there's a ghost. And that does, though, make Margaret think twice, because Margaret is deaf in one ear. And so she's never really sure if she's hearing something or she isn't. And she has to make sure that she's facing the right way as things are being said so that she can really hear it correctly. And that touch just added an incredible level to everything that happens moving forward. And it was so well done. Yeah, this is fun. This is great. If you haven't heard about this, put this on your radar for Victober if you don't read it earlier, because it saved my week. Saved my week of reading and pulled me out of what otherwise could have been a slump. So thank you, Katie. This was great. Well done. And I cannot wait to see what you do next. All right. And then let me talk about another genre book that I did. I'm really trying to read my Book of the Month Club choices. This is a Book of the Month Club choice recently. This is The Adventures of Amina al-Sirafi, and this is by Shannon Chakraborty. Now, Shannon Chakraborty has also published under S.A. Chakraborty, and she did the City of Brass trilogy. And in that, she kind of used fantasy elements from the Arabian world, with jinns and those types of mythologies, and weaved that into her story. And she's done the same here, but instead of in a desert land, she has pirates. And we have Amina, who is our main character, and she is a woman who has retired. She's put aside her wild early years and has retired from the game. And her game was, she was a pirate. She helmed a ship and had a crew, and they were pirates in the Indian Ocean. Very successful, but she has a daughter, and she has let all of that go, her wild young days, and is focused on just raising her daughter and being with her mother. She gets a visit from an incredibly wealthy woman who just so happens to be the mother of one of the ship crew members that she was close with who had died. The mother holds her responsible, but needs her help. The daughter of her deceased crew member has been kidnapped, and she asks Amina to gather the crew and go find her and bring her back. And she offers her a reward that she cannot refuse. So there's a little bit of the guilt of having lost a crew member, and then also this money reward, which would make her life significantly easier moving forward. And so off she goes. And this is wild adventure. It's, we've got the supernatural elements that are included. It's very funny. They're little interesting interludes of a narrator and Amina. Amina herself is a great character. She's a older woman. She's really bawdy. She's really ballsy. She foul language, bold, but also a heart of gold. She's been married multiple times and lived a wild life. And so this was just amusing. It was fun. I enjoyed it. I think this would be great in audio, which I did listen to City of Brass in audio and really enjoyed it. So I can imagine this would be really fun as well. So it was a nice palate cleanser, exactly what I needed. And yeah, so that's what I read this week. So let me tell you what I'm currently reading. I'll be honest, I did not read any more of Paris Stories by Mavis Gallant. I will be rectifying that today, reading more. I have made more progress in the author spotlight group that I'm hosting, and this is for Shirley Hazzard's The Great Fire. We are 3/4 of the way through. There was a lot of activity that happened in this last section, and it's given us a ton to talk about today. Shirley Hazzard is just a phenomenally astute, thoughtful, and creative writer who gives a ton of space for you to interpret what she has put on the page, but it's all been put there thoughtfully. And so it's making this reading group just exceptional. I could not be more delighted. So we have one more section next week, and then we'll be done for this book and moving on to her short stories. Then I also read more of this. This is The Belly of Paris by Emile Zola, translated by Brian Nelson. And this is, again, continues to be phenomenal. This is really the gluttony of Paris. We have Florent, who is an escaped convict, and he has returned, and he has found his younger brother well established, owning a charcuterie shop, and he moves in with him and his wife. His wife is Lisa of the Macaw part of the family. This is part of Emile Zola's Rougon Macaw series. And he is finally pushed out of the shared home to work, and when a job appears for him to be one of the inspectors, the main inspector in the fish market. So this is all about food, and it's the gluttony, it's the belly of the growing belly of Paris during the Second Empire. And it's fantastic, loving it, loving his descriptions are so vivid, so real. Zola's just a freaking master. And then Leo of Leo's Little Book Life and I are reading this book. And allow me to not forget, it was Leo's birthday on Friday. Yes, on Friday. And so if you haven't had a chance to wish him happy birthday on Instagram and you have followed any of his content, please do. He is just such a gem of a man, and wanted to make sure that his birthday celebration was everything and more. But he and I have been reading this, and it is delightful. This is South Riding by Winifred Holtby. And this is really the story of this town. And you've got all of this change and being agitated and kind of coming into this sleepy little town through the guise of this one councilman who wants to put in a railroad. You have a school headmistress who is returning to the town that she kind of grew up in many, many years ago. And she is full of ideas and is one of those people that has a dominant personality, and things are going to be done. And you just feel the wind at her back. But there's a lot of resistance and a lot of old thinking. But what's brilliant about this book so far is the characters. They just keep evolving in front of your eyes. And the moment you think you have a hold on them, something new will pop up through a relationship with another character that will unveil a different aspect of them. We're loving it. It's so, so good. Okay, and so that's all that I've read. I am looking for a spring book. I put this out last week. If you know a book that you think of as quintessentially spring, please let me know. I would be very interested. I just can't, I'm racking my brain and I'm trying to think of something that kind of falls in my wheelhouse. And I can't, Enchanted April is the only one I've read that I can think of. So anything, you smart people. But other than that, this is, I don't think I'm going to be picking up anything else unless a library hold comes up. So I think I'm going to try to dig into these and get through some of the ones that have kind of been sitting in my current reading pile for a while. So that's it for me for now. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you had a great week of reading and that your week ahead is fantastic. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.